what I'm trying to do as a scientist is a very simple and clear-cut story. It begins back about 1917. I was then about 19 years old. I had been brought up with every expectation of going into the Christian ministry, which in my family means the Episcopal Church. I was soaked in theology.
This is D-R.Uorън Маккълоу, an eminent neurologist, engineer, and mathematician. It was at his world-famous lab at MIT that the original work on the frog's eye took place.
And I got seduced by mathematics, surely because there was more fun in it, and because if you know theology at all well, you'll realize that the ideas in the mind of God are mathematics and logic. So this is the way I came into the game in the first place. And I have never had but one question in the whole of my scientific life. I've only wanted to know what is a number that a man may know it, and a man that he may know a number. I think I'm fairly clear as to the first half of it, but as the second half, a man that he may know a number, not yet. I've had to content myself with what a frog's eye tells a frog's brain, or something else of this sort. So roughly...
A frog's eye is very simple compared to a man's brain, an organ so complex that even the most optimistic believe that it will be centuries before we unravel all its mysteries. Yet, Dr. Maccullough and his colleagues believe they are beginning to understand how the higher nervous system, a man's brain, might work as a machine. A machine basically different in principle from anything we can now build, much more subtle than even our most sophisticated computers.
Now, may I make clear a distinction between your nervous system and any computing machine which is yet in existence? There is some beginning to approximate it. They are to be found chiefly in bombers and things of this sort. Now, an ordinary machine, operations are carried out sequentially. And a mistake entails mistakes which follow inevitably from it all the way through the computation. As opposed to this, there are parallel machines. That is, machines which carry on the same computation in 1, 2, 3 or more channels. Compare the results and don't go ahead until the results agree. These are strictly parallel. I'm not talking about either of these kinds of machines. I'm talking about machines which resemble, let's say, the mouth of the Danube, or the mouth of the Nile, or better yet, the mouth of the Swanee River. These are what the Greeks called anastomotic affairs. That is, the water from each contributory stream is mixed with the water from every other contributory stream before they finally get out the mouths of the river. Is that clear? There is no other word that I know for it except the old Greek word anastomotic. They're not merely braided together where the braids follow through. No, no. They're braided with an intermixture so that the information coming out at any one point in the mouth is combined from the information coming in from all of the sources of that river. Is this clear? Good. What is more, well, any man my age knows this very well. Neurons die at the order of thousands of neurons per day. We're built to run well to the 16th year of age, roughly. From that time on, you begin to be able to count the holes where there were cells and there are no more. So, you have to design it so that a cell, while it's a-dying, and while it's a-dying, it's apt to go pip, 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 and then quit. And after it's dead, it's not going to make too much difference. You would probably find at least 10% of the big cells in my cerebellum, where you could count them, are just holes filled up with glia, glue cells, supporting cells. So this kind of thing happens all the time and must happen. And yet we can go on to Well, in my family, to 100.
And the theory that you're working on explains...
The theory that we're working on takes care of all of these things. That's the important point about it.
In the summer, Dr. McCullough, his wife, and grandchildren moved to a country home in New England. All that was missing in this peaceful spot was a lake. And 30 years ago, McCullough dammed up a stream to complete his Eden. What is man? A child of nature. But now, wondering whether he can ever learn enough to make something like himself in a laboratory. What is the limit of our possible knowledge and power? Will we one day in the distant future perhaps even create beings superior to ourselves? Beings who will survive us on this planet? Dr. McCullough thinks it possible.
No, I would expect that insofar as machines might survive man, they might, they would only carry on, in a sense, the same direction, same general direction, that man would have carried on if he could have. Am I clear? So to speak, the machines would be standing on our shoulders.
Somehow the purpose that a machine, no matter how complicated and how clever, could have, to my mind, isn't equatable. When man has gone, these machines would in essence be purposeless.
I doubt that. I would say, in essence, they would be purposeful.
And there would be, in your feeling, nothing gone and nothing missing from the world.
Well, you mean in the sense in which the dinosaurs are missing?
No, I mean in the sense of something important.
Well, aren't they important? Weren't they important? I mean, there's one thing you could be pretty sure of: man won't survive forever. From all that we know of the sun and of other stars, that would be the most improbable thing. Something else will come.
And in your opinion, it might be something of man's own creation?
Yes.
Well, here's the problem that I'm trying to get at. Here's the thing that I'm trying to get at. You have two grandchildren right there. And I can't see that a machine will ever feel toward any of its
Why not?
creatures the way you feel about them. That's the one thing that I can't get.
Well, I think I could set it up for you, because I'm certain that if I do it, there is a mechanism that can do it. If I can manage to state that in a finite and unambiguous manner, then I think it can be done. And I see no reason why we can't develop a logic of relations in time to come. Granted, it's defective at the present time. Don't shake the table.
the idea of, you came from a psychology background, is that right?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
That's too complicated. We won't get into
Okay.
that.
Okay.
All right, let me just think for a moment and then I'll start talking. Are you ready to roll?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Anytime you're ready.
Okay. Well, computers first began to appear on the scene in a very vague way, you might say, after World War II. I first heard about them because I'd had occasion to do some statistical work with old IBM punch card equipment. We had these primitive prehistoric punch boards that we wired up to print things in the columns where we wanted them printed. And so I'd been involved, and so I was a little bit aware of and sensitive to the new computers coming along. Al Newell, I think, got his first impressions of computers from the fact that he worked for the Rand Corporation out on the West Coast, and they had one of the early computing setups there. As a matter of fact, he used it in some of his research. So by the early 50s, we were already aware that people were talking computers. There even were a few prophets of artificial intelligence to come, like Alan Turing, the English mathematician. And we had begun to have some contact with computers, especially Al had, out at Rand. Computers were thought of course, mostly as machines to do arithmetic very fast, on a very large scale. But it occurred to us as we got more contact with them that they really were much more general than that computers could deal with any kinds of symbols, with anything that could be symbolized, whether it was language or whether it was arithmetic or what it was. That led us to the idea that perhaps we could do some of the things we were then worrying about and working on by computer. We were trying to understand how people made decisions in an early warning station of an air defense setup. And we wanted some way of talking formally about what they were doing. We decided that computer languages might give us the way to do that. And as the idea grew on us, we decided it would be a nice thing to use computers to simulate that kind of human decision-making and human thinking. And we gradually cooked up a plan to do chess on a computer as our first task. Didn't turn out to be our first task, but we thought it was going to be. About 1954, we had our first talks on this. And 1955, Al came back to Carnegie Mellon because he'd never bothered to pick up a PhD degree, and we thought he could get one in the Graduate School of Industrial Administration in the business school. So by the end of 55, we were working very hard on this project using the RAND machine. And naturally, we thought that although no universities, or almost no universities, had computers at that time, we thought any self-respecting university ought to have a computer, and particularly at Carnegie Tech, ought to have a computer. We, together with Charlie Holt, another member of the business school faculty, we persuaded a couple of deans that this was probably a good idea. Carnegie Tech acquired its first computer, I think the first, yes, it must have been an IBM 650. And shortly thereafter, we went to Purdue and found Alan Perlis there and persuaded him to come here as a faculty member and first director of the computer lab or the computer facility for the university. We housed in the business school. The electrical engineers didn't want it because they thought they might have to maintain it, and the mathematicians didn't want it because they didn't know what they'd do with it. So we stuck it in the basement there, and we left the key, left the door open so that students could get at it. After students had been crawling around on it a while, the faculty got embarrassed and decided they'd better figure out what it was all about. So pretty soon we had a lot of people working on it. And meanwhile, Al and I had been carrying along our research, and by the middle of 1956, we had our first artificial intelligence program going, although it wasn't going on the computer here till maybe a year later. It was going out at RAND. Then the question was, who ought to make use of these? Who ought to study about computers? What should we be doing in the way of graduate training? And a little committee got set up pretty informally, which decided a good idea would be to prepare examinations for people who wanted to have computing as part of their doctoral degree. And we set that up, and 4 departments opted to use our examinations as part of the doctoral requirements: math, electrical engineering, psychology, and the business school, GSIA. So we had a going graduate program. But about 4 years before the Committee on Graduate Studies learned about this and gave us an official blessing, by that time we had about 10 doctoral students all the way through the mill. And in fact, the first doctoral degrees in computer science here weren't in computer science at all. They were in industrial administration. Alan Newell was one of them. Ed Feigenbaum, who's now one of the leading figures in expert systems, was one of those early PhDs. From then on, it was a rather natural development as people saw more and more the role that computers were going to play in every aspect of scientific work and in every aspect of the work of industry and business. I guess we weren't thinking of home computers very much in those days. But the programs in the 4 departments became very active, more and more students enrolled, and presently it became clear that we really needed a separate program of computer science, a separate department of computer science, and to separate the computer center, which was a service facility for the university, from the computer science department, which was to train students in the field. And I think that was accomplished about 1965, but the archives can give you a firmer date on that than I can. Well, that's about my part of the history. Would you like to know more about that? Or
maybe just a little more about a vision that spawned, you were saying, you know, the interest in computers. You had mentioned that, but I'd like to see maybe if you could phrase something specifically about a vision that was spurring on the use of computers.
All right. Well, very early on, as soon as it became clear to us that computers could do all kinds of symbol manipulation, not just number crunching, it seemed to us then that one could try to program computers to do almost anything that a thinking human being could do. Now, that's a pretty large order, and there are a lot of people today who still don't think that's possible. They're wrong, of course, but they have a right to an opinion. It was a very extravagant dream, of course, in the 1950s, and you don't start out trying to climb a mountain like that. You start out with some things that are doable. And so we took some fairly well-structured tasks, like playing chess, I guess that's well-structured, like discovering proofs for theorems. We took those well-structured tasks and asked whether we could write programs to do those. And we're particularly interested, our group was, not all AI people have been, our group was particularly interested in seeing whether we could do them using the same kinds of processes and techniques we thought human beings were using when they did those same kinds of tasks. Better?
Yes, thank you.
Did you have any idea that things, well, you must have had an inkling. Have things progressed as quickly as you would have liked to have seen them? Have they progressed faster? Or is the science at a stage now that you would have?
Well, back in 1957, at a meeting of the Operations Research Society held here in Pittsburgh, we made some predictions about the field. Almost every one of those predictions was wrong in detail, but the predictions as a whole were quite right in principle. But we said certain things were going to happen in 10 years, for example, that the world's chess champions was going to be a computer. Well, it hadn't quite happened yet, and 30 years have gone by. But essentially what we were trying to do at that time was to give people a feeling that some very important things were going to happen that weren't just a matter of doing computations to find out whether airplane wings were going to stay on or fall off. It was much broader than that. And we tried to present some concrete examples. Now, some things have gone very fast indeed, and some things have gone slower. The slower things, I don't know whether we certainly didn't predict that. The slower things have to do with the functions of the human eyes, the human ears. Those are very complicated devices. They've had 400 million years of mammalian evolution to bring them to their present state. And the hardest part of artificial intelligence today is to build sensors like the eye and like the ear, and we're not near to that yet. On the other hand, when we started out, I guess we thought that getting a computer to have deep thoughts, the kinds of thoughts that professors or businessmen or lawyers have, we thought that was going to be real hard. And that's proved to be not nearly as hard as we thought it was going to be. Getting computers to use natural language, to use the English language or whatever, intermediate. Within limits, that's well within the art today. What we don't have yet are computers that have stored away in them the vast mass of kind of random assorted memories that human beings have. And you need to have those kinds of assorted memories to do language properly. So it's a mixed bag, but on the whole, I think this field has really moved forward in a kind of amazing way. Partly because the hardware has gotten better and better and allowed us to lift our sights as to what you could do in a reasonable time. But partly because as one of these barriers went down, as we found out how to do certain kinds of tasks, we could move on to others. And today, the kinds of things computers are doing are professional level, expert tasks of human beings.
What do you see as the next big step, the next big?
I guess I see a lot of little steps. I think that we're learning a lot today, for example, about how human beings use diagrams and pictures to aid them in their thinking. We don't always think in words. We think in a lot of ways, and diagrams and pictures are an important part of that. That's an area people have really just started to work on, and I think very good progress is being made. I'd look to that to be an important advance. I think our abilities to build appropriate sensory organs for computers are increasing, and that's going to allow us to move forward more rapidly with robotics over the next few years. Language processing is certainly going to advance because now we are really beginning to build big semantic memories, big memories in which you can store away all the kinds of silly things we human beings know about.
Can you think of anything?
The only thing I would ask you maybe to elucidate a little more is, you've talked about the uses of computer science in various areas, but the study of, or the area of computer science as a science, the developing into a science, maybe if you can reflect on how that has come to be.
That's a little harder to say. Computer science has been a science since day one. What is a science? A science is an area of phenomena where you try to examine those phenomena, find out how they work, understand them, build theories about them. The phenomenon here is the computer. You got a computer here, well, how does it behave? What's it going to do? How can you predict that behavior? That's what this science is all about. So today, of course, we know a great deal about that we didn't know 30 years ago, and that's why we're able to build programs today which will do the variety of practical everyday tasks that they do. But I can't set any date and say there wasn't a science before and there's a science now. First scientific papers in this field were already being written in the 1950s.
Would you care to comment on some of the work that's happened in the computer science department in the past and what's happening today?
Oh, wow. You mean all the good things we've done here? Well, it's a good rule in science that when a new field opens up, you better be there firstest with the mostest. It's usually the people who get there early who are able to maintain a position on the forefront of that science. And Carnegie Mellon, or Carnegie Tech as it was then, was exceedingly fortunate in that respect, that we did have early contact with computers, and therefore we were one of the first schools in the country which were doing something serious about this. And so we've been able to, I think, to chalk up a number of major contributions to the field that are generally recognized. We were among the pioneers in early language development. We developed the first list processing languages, so-called, which are the basic languages used in artificial intelligence. Alan Perlis contributed a version of early Fortran that would run on the 650, which was a small computer, and therefore made a major contribution in making those languages available around the universities of the country. We certainly made many of the early contributions to symbolic computing of all kinds in this country. We have, I think, throughout the history of this field, have been in the forefront of research on human problem solving and the application of both what we know about human problem solving and computer problem solving to areas like expert systems. One of the first major expert systems running in this country was done here by John McDermott and others, a system for planning computer systems for customers. Very important work was done here over the years on the understanding of speech sounds, of language. There are a number of the early speech recognition systems were done here by Raj Reddy and the people who worked with him. And that's just a very small sample of what's been going on.